Number 8, Ranger vs. Grizzly. In July 2018, 50-year-old Canadian park ranger Jordan Carberry was attacked by a vicious mama grizzly bear. Carberry was at his home in Bella Coola when he heard some loud noises outside. It was about 5 a.m. and he decided to go out and investigate. Thinking it could be an animal, he took his phone with him, hoping he might be able to snap some photos. He was right about it being an animal, but was wrong about being able to snap some cute pictures. He walked outside and spotted some bear cubs in his cherry tree. The thing about bear cubs is that the mama bear is always nearby. One of the cubs fell out of the tree after a branch broke, and Carberry noticed something out of the corner of his eye. It was a massive 500-pound or just over 225-kilogram grizzly, with her eyes locked on him. He immediately turned and started running back towards his house. He was only about 40 feet or just about 12 meters away, and the next thing he knew, he was tackled from behind and sent flying through the air. The cub's mother knocked him down and sunk her teeth into his skin. She picked him up by his head and his thigh. He repeatedly kicked the grizzly in the face and punched her in the snout in a bid to escape. He dropped his cell phone in the process, so was unable to call for help. The grizzly eventually let him go, and Carberry managed to make it back inside. He grabbed his keys and ran back out to his car to drive to the nearest hospital about 10 minutes away. Carberry, who thought the bear may have torn him open and was worried his organs may have been falling out, kept telling himself not to pass out on the drive. The mama bear ripped off a portion of his scalp, half his ear, tore his pectoral muscle, gave him an umbilical hernia, and several deep canine teeth puncture wounds, plus several other claw wounds. He's still recovering from the injuries and multiple surgeries, but he's lucky to be alive. He posted several photos of his injuries on Facebook, including one showing how the bear's canines left a 3 to 4 centimeter puncture hole. Inspector Len Butler of the Conservation Officer Society said the bear would not be put down because she was simply defending her cubs. The trees may have to be cut down because cherries attract hungry bears looking for a snack. Carberry, who said the attack was not the bear's fault because he let his guard down, was glad to learn that the animal would not be killed. Number 7, decapitated rattlesnake bite. A South Texas man almost died after he was bitten by the head of a rattlesnake he just decapitated. Jeremy and Jennifer Sutcliffe were doing yard work at their home near Lake Corpus Christi in May 2018. Jennifer was pulling some grass growing around her flowers when she almost grabbed the 4-foot or just over 1 meter rattlesnake. The snake was not happy about it and lifted its head towards her. She screamed for her husband, and Jeremy ran over with a shovel and hacked the snake's head off. About 10 minutes later, he went to pick up the remains of the rattlesnake's head, and it lunged at him, biting his hand. And because the head was removed from the body, all the snake's venom was released in the bite. Knowing it was about to die, the snake unleashed all of its aggression in an effort to survive. They can still attack even an hour after they've been decapitated because their metabolisms are a lot slower than those of humans, meaning their internal organs stay alive for longer. Basically, all of the venom in the rattlesnake was now in Jeremy's hand. He ripped it off and immediately started feeling dizzy. Jennifer called 911, put her husband in the car, and began the 45-mile or about 72-kilometer drive to the nearest hospital. He began having seizures, losing his vision, and bleeding internally. An emergency helicopter met them about 10 miles or 16 kilometers down the road, and Jeremy was airlifted the rest of the way. He was put in a medically induced coma and hooked up to a ventilator. Jeremy needed 26 doses of anti-venom, whereas a normal patient gets 2 to 4. Number 6, punching a great white shark. In July 2017, Leanne Erickson was almost killed by a 10-foot or 3-meter great white shark. The mother of 3 was at the San Onofre Beach in Southern California with friends and family when the horrific incident happened. Dusty Phillips, the victim's boyfriend, was surfing, and Leanne decided to paddle out towards him, but as she swam closer to Dusty's board, she felt something against her leg. Before she had time to react, a massive great white was chomping down on her and dragging her underwater. Dusty heard a piercing scream and looked back to see that Leanne was gone, and the water was turning crimson red. The shark pulled Leanne by her thigh 30 feet or just about 9 meters under the surface and began thrashing. Alone with the ferocious man-eater, she fought desperately to escape its jaws, punching it in the face over and over again. All she could think about were her kids and what life would be like for them if she didn't survive this. Her hands moved towards the shark's eye and she started digging in. She later said she felt like she was putting her hand in jello, and after a frantic battle, the ocean predator finally let go, taking a huge chunk of Leanne's thigh with it. Leanne was airlifted to the hospital where she was placed in a medically induced coma. At first, doctors thought they would have to amputate her leg. However, they then decided to graft tissue from her other leg to replace what had been lost. Leanne spent 9 weeks in the intensive care unit, undergoing 8 surgeries. And now for number 5, but first we want to give a shout out to Robin Enoch and Perfectly Imperfect 85. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Bad Badger family. Number 5, Kangaroo Christmas. It was Christmas Eve 2017 when a brave father saved his 2 little daughters from being killed by a kangaroo that almost tore his ear off in a terrifying attack. Matthew Chenhall and his family were camping at his father-in-law's property in Lake Conjola, Australia. After eating lunch, he took a walk with his girls along the river. They were playing and wandering through the brush when they were stopped in their tracks by a 6.5-foot or just about 2-meter tall male eastern gray kangaroo. When it started breathing aggressively, one of the girls panicked and threw her sausage sandwich at it, assuming it was after food, but it didn't want to get out of the way. By the time Matthew got to them, the kangaroo was growling and hissing. It reared up into an attack mode, so he got between it and his daughters to shield them. The animal put Matthew in a headlock with one arm and ripped his ear apart with the other. He told the girls to run. He managed to get his left arm free and punched the kangaroo in the chin, which startled it and loosened its grip enough for Matthew to pull his head free. He escaped the animal's clutches, but his right ear was torn to shreds. A sharp kick broke 2 ribs and he suffered deep scratches on his back and leg. Matthew was able to get back to his family, who called for help. He was rushed to Shoalhaven Hospital, where he was lucky a plastic surgeon was on duty. Otherwise, he'd have to go all the way to Sydney and he would miss Christmas. But he didn't miss Christmas. He was able to spend the holiday with his family. With what the kangaroo did to him, it surely would have killed his daughters. It was a Christmas miracle. Number 4, macaque attack. In 2014, news headlines reported on the growing problem of monkeys taking over the capital of Delhi. At the time, there were an estimated 30,000 red-faced rhesus macaques running wild throughout the city, and they had a nasty reputation of being aggressive. The monkeys had gotten used to people feeding them and were getting alarmingly comfortable with stealing food, alcohol, clothing, medical equipment, and other belongings from innocent civilians. The monkeys even broke into cars on occasion. At only 8 pounds or just over 3.5 kilograms each, it might seem a little funny that anyone would be scared of these tiny little cuties. But oftentimes people are bitten during these encounters, which is especially concerning since around 90% of the monkeys are infected with tuberculosis. They're powerful in numbers, as Deputy Mayor Surinder Singh Bajwa learned in 2007. While standing on the balcony of his home, he was attacked by a group of macaques. He fell off the terrace while trying to fight them off and sadly died from head injuries. Even today, tens of thousands of monkeys roam Delhi. It's forbidden to kill them in the Hindu religion, and some people continue to feed them, encouraging the creatures to continue associating people with food. There are ongoing efforts to curb the population, even including large-scale sterilization campaigns, but it will probably be a while before the monkeys become manageable. Number 3, hangry polar bear. 17-year-old Horatio Chappell joined around 80 other students for a month-long Arctic expedition to Norway's Svalbard archipelago in 2011. A few weeks into the trip, Horatio spotted a huge polar bear footprint in the ground, sparking interest, but not really any fear from his fellow classmates. Days later, a polar bear breached a faulty tripwire that was meant to protect the camp wires from attacks. It slashed open the tent that Horatio was sleeping in and viciously clawed at his head and upper body, killing him and injuring 2 others. A pair of expedition leaders were also wounded before the bear was shot and killed. Horatio's parents had expressed concerns about the possibility of a polar bear attack before the trip and accused the expedition company of failing to keep their son safe. A coroner's inquest agreed that the tripwire system was faulty. Parts were missing, forcing the group to unsuccessfully try rigging it with paper clips. But the investigation determined that Horatio's death was not caused by failures on the company's behalf. Findings also revealed that the group's rifle was very old and difficult to use, and that the travelers had minimal firearms training. Consequently, the expedition leader who shot the bear was unsuccessful on his first attempt and had to reload the gun with serious injuries, delaying his ability to shoot at the animal. The bear's remains determined that it was old, starving, and his teeth were in bad shape. This is undoubtedly what triggered it to become desperate and unusually aggressive, even for a polar bear. Number 2, Buffalo Brawl. Early in 2018, the Zimbabwean town of Dete, wild buffaloes started mixing in with cattle herds owned by farmers. The massive animals had strayed into the grazing pastures from the nearby Hwange National Park, and farmers had the task of chasing them away. A villager named Thabani Dube was tending to his cattle when a large male buffalo started to get a little too close to some of his cows that were in heat. He was having a difficult time keeping it away, and it kept coming back to the herd. The buffalo charged at Dube's bull, prompting the farmer to release his dogs on the animal, which only made it angrier, and ran towards Dube himself. The bull managed to gore the man's shoulder, but luckily he was able to escape without any serious injuries by going over to a trench that the buffalo couldn't cross. This was just one of numerous attacks that happened as the issue of buffalo intermingling with cattle worsened. Villagers were left fearing that at some point there would be a fatal clash. There were also consequences of unplanned pregnancies between buffaloes and cows, which created highly aggressive wild offspring that had no business being on a peaceful farm. Around the same time, residents complained about wild hyenas and lions preying on their livestock. A Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority spokesperson reassured the public that they were taking reports seriously and responding to them as effectively as possible. Number 1. Close call, Crocs. In June 2017, an Australian woman miraculously cheated death after she was thrown from and subsequently run over by her own fishing boat in crocodile-infested waters. 34-year-old Sandy Laverty was setting crab pots at the mouth of the Kato River in East Arnhem, Northern Territory, when the incident occurred. She was with her husband Brendan, her young daughters Ava and Mia, and unknowingly a perilous gang of saltwater crocodiles lurking in the muddy waters below. Sandy was seated at the front of the boat while Brendan was steering. As he accelerated, the crab pots stacked in the middle of the boat fell over, prompting him to let go momentarily of the controls in order to grab them. In less than 2 seconds, the boat violently veered right. Because Sandy was at the top of the boat, she slid right to the side and fell into the water. The boat continued to spin wildly, turning around in the water and plowing over the top of Sandy before Brendan was able to hit the kill switch. However, by that time, Sandy's shirt had become entangled in the motor, pinning her tightly to the underside of the vessel beneath the surface. Brendan jumped in and cut his wife free, but the propeller had sliced open her back and blood was flowing out into the river. That's when they both really began to panic because they knew there were multiple crocodiles beneath them, ready for an easy meal. Just as a massive croc was coming towards them, they made it to the back of the boat. Sandy collapsed in the chair as her husband gunned it for the nearest hospital. Sandy had suffered serious lacerations across her back and buttocks, damaged her spleen, and punctured her lung. She also busted her collarbone and broke 9 ribs, but at least she wasn't eaten by a crocodile. Thanks for watching. Have you ever been attacked by a wild animal? Tell us about it in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.